Welcome to this WiseOwl tutorial. In this session we're going to teach you all about creating calculated columns in reporting services reports. In this session you'll learn how to create calculated columns using the expression builder tool. We'll start by using basic arithmetic to create some simple expressions, and then move on to show you how to use functions including conditional functions such as if and switch, how you can perform calculations with text, and then finally a few useful date functions as well. So let's get started. One of the most common uses for expressions in reporting services is to create calculated columns based on information stored in the dataset. So in this simple report here I've got a table that contains the film's name and its budget and box office takings in US dollars. If I want to work out how much profit or loss that film made, I can create a calculated column which subtracts the budget from the box office. So to do that I'll need to head to the report data window. Now I can see the dataset already contains the three columns that are shown in my table. What I'd like to do is add an extra column to it. So if I right click on the dataset itself and then choose to add a calculated field, it will take me to the Fields tab of the Dataset Properties dialog box with a brand new row available. I'm going to call this Film PL, and then for the field source what I need to do now is build an expression. And the best place to do that is using the expression builder. If I click the FX button that appears next to this box, and I'll see now the expression builder dialog box. Now I'm going to perform a simple bit of arithmetic here. I'm going to simply subtract one column from another. So all I'm going to do first is find the field that I want to use. Now the category list at the bottom left hand corner contains an option called Fields, which is linked to the dataset I've just added my calculated column to. If I click onto that option, it will expose all of the field names from that table. What I want to do is use first of all the box office dollars field. If I double click on this, I'll find that the full syntax of that expression gets read into the dialog box for me. All I need to do now is type in a minus symbol, and then again double click on the film budget dollars column, and that will be fed into the expression as well. So creating basic arithmetic is really that straightforward. If I choose OK, I'll now have a new column called Film PL, and if I click OK again, it will be added to the dataset here. And I can also add it to a table in a report in exactly the same way I'd expect to add any existing columns to a table. If I click and drag Film PL, I can attach it to the right hand edge of the table, and there we go. If I preview the report now, I should see my new column appears just as though it was a built-in one. And that column works in exactly the same way as all other columns work now. I can choose to sort my table. I'd like to see the most profitable film at the top of the list. So back in the design view, I can right click at the top left hand corner of the table to see Tablix properties, and on the sorting tab I can choose to add a sort by film profit loss in Z to A order. If I choose OK and preview the report one more time, I'll see the most profitable films at the top of the list, unfortunately. As well as using simple arithmetic in a calculated column, you can also use more complex functions to perform more elaborate calculations. So what I'd like to do next is generate some kind of description about whether a film made a profit or made a loss. And I can do that using a function you may have encountered before in Microsoft products, the if function. So to create this I'll head back to the design view, back to the report data window, right click on the dataset and add a calculated column. This time I'm going to call the column Film PL Description. If I could spell description, that would help. And then click the FX button again over at the right hand side to build my expression. Now rather than starting with a field this time, I'm going to jump into the Common Functions category. And this category will give you a list of the various categories of functions you can access in reporting services. They're fairly familiar to you if you've ever used Microsoft Excel or Microsoft Access or a variety of other Microsoft applications. The function that I want is actually contained in the in the category called Program Flow. If I select that option, I'll see that there are three options in here. The one I want is the if function, or as it's spelt in reporting services, if. It's got two i's in it. If I select the function itself, I'll just increase the width of this dialog box, you can see that you get an example of how the function is used in the bottom right hand corner. This is very similar to what I'm going to do actually. To start typing the function in, I can either literally type it directly into the box, or sometimes it's easier to just double click on the function name and that will begin typing the function for you. You'll also get this tooltip that appears that shows you the list of arguments or the bits of information required by the function. So I know that I need something called an expression, which must return Boolean, which is true or false, and then I have a true part and a false part argument. My expression, my logical test here is very straightforward. I simply want to test whether the film box office dollars, so if I head back to the fields category and double click film box office dollars, is greater than the film's budget dollars. You'll notice the squiggly red underlining in reporting services. This indicates that there's a syntax error in the statement, simply because I haven't finished typing it in yet. It's a little bit trigger happy. So there's my logical test. If I type in a comma now, if that condition is true, I'd like to see the word profit appear. Any literal text in reporting services is enclosed in a set of double quotes. If I type in another comma, this takes me to the false part argument. So if my box office takings was not more than my budget, I'm going to use the word loss. I suppose technically that could either be a break even or a loss, but I'm just going to enter it as the word loss. Finally, all I need to do is close the set of round brackets, and hopefully the squiggly red underlines disappear. That's a good sign, and I can then choose OK. If I choose OK one more time, the last thing that I need to do is assign that field to a column in the table. If I insert a column to the right, I can now simply select that column from the field selector, film PL description. And if I preview the report, I'll see lots of profits at the top of my list, and hopefully right at the end, a few losses as well. So there we go. There's a couple of simple calculated columns using the expression builder. We've just seen how to use the if function to distinguish between one of two possibilities. But what if you have a whole range of different answers that you might want to get from a question? So for example, here I'd like to distinguish between my film's running time in minutes by creating some kind of description. So that films that are, say, less than 100 minutes are short films, between 100 and 150 are medium, and then between 150 and 200 are long, and so on. So in that case I have more than just two possible answers. So using the if function is a little bit tricky. What I'm going to do instead is use a function called switch. If I head back to the design view, in the report data window, I've got a smaller data set, this time just the film's name and running time in minutes. I can right click the dataset again and choose to add a calculated field. I'll call this film length description, and then click the FX button to build my expression. Now you'll find the switch function in the same category as the if function. So from the category list on the left hand side, look for common functions and then select program flow. And there's switch sitting at the bottom. Now the way switch works is you have pairs of arguments, so you have a logical test or a condition, and then what do you want to do if that condition is true. So if I double click the switch function, my first logical test is going to be whether the film's runtime minutes is less than 100. So I select the fields category on the left hand side and then double click film runtime minutes. Type in less than 100 followed by a comma, and then if that's true I'd like to display the word short as the answer. So that would be a short film. Now from this point on everything else is exactly the same. It's just one test and one answer in pairs of arguments. So if I type in a comma, I can ask if film runtime in minutes is less than 150. And a comma, and if that's true it would be a medium film. I'd like to have a capital M there. And then I can have another comma and if the film runtime in minutes is less than 200, another comma, and I'm going to have the word long, capital L. And then finally, for everything else, what I'd like to see is the word epic. So basically anything that's 200 minutes or longer is an epic length film. Now, two ways I could achieve that. I could type in a comma and then explicitly test if runtime minutes is greater than or equal to 200. But as a neat little trick, I can simply enter the value true, then another comma, and then the word epic. If I close round brackets, then that completes my switch function. So the reason this little last part works is that switch evaluates the conditions in the order you type them. So imagine that I had a film that was 220 minutes long. It wouldn't fall into the first category here. So we move on to evaluate the second condition. Is not less than 150, is not less than 200. So anything else at all must be an epic film, because true will always be true. I've accidentally done something that I shouldn't have done there. Let me move that back to where it was. Okay, so there we go. If I choose OK and choose OK again, I can now add that column to my table, and with a quick preview, have a description for all my film lengths. One of the most common expressions you'll perform with text is joining different bits of text together to form a longer sentence, or concatenating. So for example here we could build a sentence for each record that says things like Jurassic Park is a medium film, King Kong is a long film, and so on. So to do that I'm going to go back to the design view, and in the report data window right click on the data set and choose to add a calculated field. I'll call this field film length sentence, and then click the FX button to build my expression. Now I don't need to use any functions in order to do this. This is a bit more like basic arithmetic. If I find the fields category first of all, the start of my expression, the start of my sentence will always be the name of the film. So I can double click film name. If I then type in a space and an ampersand, so shift and the number 7 on your keyboard probably, this is the symbol to join one bit of text to another. The next bit of text is going to be a piece of literal text, so in a set of double quotes, the words or the phrase is a, and then close the double quotes. You'll notice I've actually added a space either side of the phrase within the double quotes. Then another space and an ampersand, and then I want to join on the description that I've just built, so the film length description. So I can double click on this field here. The final thing to join on again with another ampersand is the word film in a set of double quotes. This time I've left a space just before the word film so that I will get a space after the word short, medium, long and the word film. If I choose OK and choose OK again, I should be able to drag that column in and attach it to the right hand side of my table. And when I preview the report now, I'll have my sentence built. Joining bits of text together, or concatenating, is actually the easiest thing you can do with text. It's much more tricky to split one larger piece of text into separate parts, but that's what we're going to try to do here. Now, in a well-designed database, you'd usually find that the first name and last name are in separate columns, but here it just so happens that we've got the entire name in one field. What we're going to do is split out the first name and last name by identifying where the space is between the first name and last name, and using that as the point at which to divide. So we're going to go back to the design view, and in the report data window, right-click the dataset and add a calculated field. The first one I'll call first name, and then use the FX button to build my expression. In the list of common functions there's a text category, and this gives you a whole long list of different functions useful for working with text. The first function we're going to use here is called left. If I double click the left function, it requires two arguments, a string of text and a length, as in the number of letters that I want to get from the left hand edge. So the text that I'm getting my letters from is the actor's name. Follow that with a comma, and then I have to say how many letters do I want to get. So this is going to be different for each actor. For Tom Cruise it'll be 3 letters, for Jack Black it'll be 4 letters, and so on. So I'm going to calculate this based on the position of the space in the person's name. And to do that I'm going to go back to the text category of functions and look for a function called instr, which is short for instring. There are 2 arguments for instring. It's the piece of text you're looking within and then the piece of text you're looking for. If I double click instr then, the first argument is the actor name again. The second argument, if I type in a comma, is I'm looking for a space. So in a set of double quotes, type in a space. Then I can close a set of round brackets. Now the instr function, as it's listed here, will tell me the position of the space in a person's name. So in Tom Cruise's name, the position of the space is TOM space, so it's number 4. Now I know that Tom Cruise's name his first name only has 3 letters, so I want to subtract 1. Whoops, that was a bit silly, wasn't it? I typed in a minus symbol while I still had the instr function selected, so it overtyped what I had. So there we go. Now that I've got the instr function rebuilt, I can type in -1 and that will subtract 1 from the position of the space. Finally, to get rid of the squiggly red underline, I can close around brackets, and if I choose OK and choose OK again, and just to show that this does work, if I bring in the first name, preview the report, and there we go, I get everybody's first name. Back to the design view and we'll quickly build the last name field. So in the report data window, right click the dataset, add calculated field, we'll call this last name, and then use the expression builder. This time, hopefully fairly obviously, I want to get text from the right hand side of an actor's name. So in the common functions text category, double click right. Actor name is the text that I want to get my letters from, and then a comma. Now this time the number of letters that I want is calculated slightly differently. So I'm not just going to use the position of the space. I'm first of all going to find out the entire length of that actor's name. So I'm going to use the len function and then build in the actor's name. So this will tell me the full length of all the letters, all the characters in the actor's name. From that, I'd like to subtract the position of the space. So I'm going to use instring again to do that. So from the instring function of actor name, looking for a space, close 2 sets of round brackets. So this bit here works out the length of the actor's name and subtracts from that the position of the space. If I choose OK again, and then add the last name field to the table, I can preview the report, and finally now I've got each actor's last name. So now I can sort my actors in alphabetical order of surname rather than by first name. So we've just seen how to extract different pieces of text from a longer piece of text, which can be a little bit fiddly. But when you're working with dates and you want to do the same thing, things get a little bit easier. So here we've got a list of films and their release dates. And what I'd like to be able to do is pick out, for example, which month a film was released in, regardless of which year, which month the film was released in, and then maybe be able to sort the table by months. So there's a couple of steps involved. But if I head back to the design view and then use the report data window, and again right click the dataset and choose to add a calculated field. I'm going to create a column called film month and use the FX button to build my expression. In the common functions category you'll find a date and time section. There's all sorts of useful functions available in here. I'm going to start by using the month function, and if I double click month, all I need to provide for it is a date, and it tells you that it returns an integer value 1 through 12. So if I look at the fields list and then double click film release date, close around brackets, choose OK and OK again, I can add film month to the table and preview the report. So we can see what that does. It literally gives us the number of the month that a film was released in. I think it'd be a bit more useful, or certainly more nice to look at, to see the name of the month rather than the number. So if I head back to the design view and report data, I'm going to add another calculated field this time. I'm going to call it film month name and use the FX button. In the common functions category, date and time, you'll probably see that there is a month name function immediately below month. Now, the reason we had to calculate month first is because month name is dependent on a number. So if I double click the month name function, I couldn't just insert a simple date and calculate the name of the month. What I have to do first is calculate the month of a date, and from that I can derive the name of the month. So here I can do it in two ways. I can either embed the month function again and refer to the film release date, or because I've already calculated the film month separately, I can just simply feed that into the function. If I choose OK and OK again, I'll drop that column into the table, and I should see that I can see now the month names. What I think I'd really like to do is something that we saw in a previous video. I want to group my films by which month they were released in. If I head back to the design view, I'm going to remove the month name column from the table, and instead I'm going to use the groups panel to add a group. I right click the details row, choose to add a group and a parent group. I'd like to group on film month name, and I'm going to have a header and a footer there as well. I'm going to choose OK. If I have a look at the preview of the report, what I should see now is that I get the films in each month grouped under a month heading. Now, the small problem with doing this is that by default, reporting services will sort the grouped field alphabetically. There's no way that I can change the sort order of the film month name to show January, February, March, etc. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the fact that I've calculated the film month separately to sort by the film month. If I go back to the design view, to change the sorting of a group, I need to right click on the group heading in the groups panel. I can then choose group properties, and in the sorting tab you can see that it's already sorted by film month name. If I click onto the drop down arrow, I can choose film month instead and then choose OK. If I go back to the preview now, I should see that January appears first because that's month 1, and so on and so on and so on. Another useful thing that you can do with dates is calculate the difference between them. And to demonstrate that, we're going to show you how to calculate the age of our films in years. There's several steps involved, but we begin as ever back in the design view and choosing to add a calculated field to the dataset. I'm going to call the field film age and then click the FX button to launch the expression builder. Now in the common functions folder, the date and time category contains a function called datediff, and its job is literally to calculate the difference between two dates. And you can do that in various increments of time. So the examples at the bottom here show me how to calculate the difference in years. I can do that either by using the code 4y's in a set of double quotes, or using the date interval keyword instead. If I insert the date diff function first by double clicking, and then I can type in date interval followed by a full stop, and this will give me an idea of all the various increments of time I can use. Now, as I said, for our films I'm interested in the year, so if I double click year, that will give me the appropriate code. The next two arguments are dates, and you usually begin by providing the starting date. So for my starting date for my films, that's their release date, so I can enter that field. And then finally, to calculate today's date, which is what I want to base my calculation on, back in the date and time category, and find the function called today. Today is one of those odd functions that doesn't have any arguments, but you still do need to have the open and close brackets, and I'll need to close an extra set of brackets for the date diff function. And finally, if I click OK and click OK again. I can then add that field to my table and have a look at the results. And what we should see now is that our films have their age in years calculated. Well, it's not quite as simple as it first appears. So Spider-Man's been calculated accurately, 2002. The date today, by the way, I show you down in the bottom right hand corner, is the 10th of August 2012. So Spider-Man definitely is 10 years old at this point. If I scroll down a little bit further, however, and find films such as Waterworld, which has been reported as 17 years old. Well, it's true that Waterworld is 17 years old this year, but it shouldn't be 17 years old yet. In fact, it shouldn't be 17 years old until tomorrow. And this is the problem with the datediff function. It ignores the days and the months part of a date. And when you ask it for the difference in years, literally performs a calculation, 2012 minus 1995, and then gives you the difference between those two numbers. So clearly we need another solution to calculate the age properly. So to start calculating a film's age more accurately, we're going to begin by calculating the film's birthday in this year. So we're going to work out at which point the film will turn this age. So back to the design view, and in the report data window we'll add a new calculated field, and this one will be called film birthday. The FX button will launch the expression builder, and in the common functions category, the date and time section will give us access to the date add function. So if I double click date add, it's got very similar arguments to datediff, but the job of date add is to, hopefully as you'd guess by now, add a unit of time to a given date. The starting point is what increment of time you're interested in, so just like with datediff, we're going to use date interval year, and then the number of those increments of time that we'd like to add. Well, that's what we've previously calculated in the film age. I could actually embed or nest the datediff function right here as the second argument of date add. But what I'm going to do instead, as I've already calculated it, I'm going to refer to the film age field. Finally, the third argument says which date I want to add that number of date units to. And I want to add all those units to the film's release date. So if I close the round brackets and then hit OK and OK again, I can drop the birthday field onto my table and then have a preview of the report. Actually, I should have formatted the date first to make it a little bit easier to read. So let's head back to the design view, text box properties, and in the number tab, the dates category, and I'm going to use a fairly UK based date format, sorry US chums. Back to the preview again, and there we go. Hopefully now we can see that the birthday of the film this year is this number of years from this date. So that means for Waterworld, it tells me that its birthday isn't until tomorrow. Again, remembering that we're on the 10th of August 2012 at the time of recording. So there's one more step to perform. Now that we know the film's birthday, we can simply check to see whether that date has passed using a simple if statement. And if the date hasn't happened yet, we can simply subtract 1 year from the age that's reported by datediff. So one final time, back to the design view and the report data window, and we'll add a new calculated field which we'll call film age accurate. And in the FX expression builder, we're going to use a simple if function, which I'm actually going to type in this time. So the expression that we're going to use, we're going to check if the film's birthday is after or greater than, using the closed angle bracket symbol, and then in the common functions category, look for the today function. So is the film's birthday after today? If that's true, I'll enter a comma and then the value I want to return, if that's true, is the age of the film that I calculated previously minus 1. Finally, one more comma, and if that's not true, so if the film's birthday has passed, then I can use the original calculation that we built earlier on. close the round brackets and choose OK, and choose OK again. And I can finally drop this column into the table and then preview the report. And hopefully we can see now that most of the films are actually working properly, although there's another one, in fact, King Kong, who's not 7 until December this year, is now being reported accurately as 6 years old. There's Waterworld now being reported accurately as 16. So it's a little bit of effort to get there, but that's how you can calculate the age of things accurately in reporting services. If you've enjoyed this training video, you can find many more online training resources at www.wiseowl.co.uk.